Okay, hi Brian, how are you?
Hi, how's it going? I'm doing well.
Thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it. Your publicist sent us probably the world's shortest bio. It's literally two
That's on
sentences.
purpose.
Okay, it's literally two sentences long.
Yeah, that's how I like it.
All right. Well, listen, we're going to have to fill in the blanks a little bit,
Let's do that. Yeah, I
elaborate.
just I don't know what it is about. I always find, first of all, because generally those bios start with you, the person, and so I just feel like it's a strange exercise in ego to write paragraph. And like I'm figuring like what's important. I write books. I play piano, and that's all. Anything else we could discuss?
I'm just curious if how what kind of reaction do you get from that sort of a bio on a website though? Because I think people would come to your website wanting more information.
Oh, I have on my actual website. It's a little bit more personal. It's the same bio, but then it goes on to talk about which books that I have in production and or that are on the market that are being written, and then it mentions my short but brief studies of classical piano, and then an invitation to follow me on social media.
Well, let's talk a little bit about music first, because I'm a fellow musician, and then we'll get to your book. I know you're here to promote a book. We will get it into the interview. But let's talk a little bit about music first. Now, before we got on, we were moving around in different rooms to get the right acoustics. You have a couple of pianos. Is your primary genre of music classical?
Currently, yes. I'm a late bloomer. It's not like I had never touched the piano. Anytime I was a guitarist from the 19 to like 26, pretty actively in bands and stuff like that. And then I moved from Youngstown, Ohio to San Francisco. And then I just really didn't have time to devote to it. And anytime there was a piano near me, I just couldn't keep my hands off the instrument. I tried multiple times throughout my life, starting in my early to mid 20s to teach myself, and I ended up being stuck in Albuquerque, New Mexico, about 4 years ago for an extended period of time. It's a very long story, but through that boredom, I'm like, well, I'm finally going to start taking piano lessons, and so it just happens that for whatever reason, it's interesting because I'm basically a metalhead. If you would ask me what kind of music I listen to. I prefer harder rock. And then beyond that, I prefer classical piano sonatas. But I think if you listen to specifically like Beethoven's 23rd Sonata, which is called the Appassionata, to me, that's pure heavy metal. Beethoven just didn't know that yet.
Well, you know what? I'll agree with you. I think there's a lot of similarity, and especially from some of the prog rock bands in the '70s.
Sure.
They definitely went there. They definitely took a lot of the classical. I don't want to say riffs because I don't know if Beethoven even used the word riff, but
Yeah, well, I just be arpeggios, basically.
yeah, okay. Even the Beatles took stuff from, I mean, on Abbey Road.
The influence that these geniuses had, I mean, that's part of the reason why I ended up studying it, because I'm not a religious person. And I've always wanted to like understand what it is to kind of know that higher spiritual consciousness. And I find that I get that specifically when I play Bach. It's like I describe it to people as a sensation of, imagine if you had an itch on your back and you finally got to scratch it, like how great that feels. That's how my brain feels when I'm playing J.S. Bach pieces. It's a very interesting phenomenon.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I mean, it's one of the reasons why they have such incredible music in cathedrals.
Yes.
Is
Yeah, specifically some of those. If I could somehow figure out how to get a pipe organ, I would be the hat, because now that I have two pianos. I would like to get a proper harpsichord, and if I could get like a working pipe organ to play some of those fugues, that would be incredible. But I don't, I would want, obviously, it's not so much about the space, because I sort of have the space right now. I just can't envision, because I live in like a tower loft condo. I don't envision that the neighbor factor, like, hey, by the way, the Phantom of the Opera lives down the hall, and we just hear him playing pipe organ. It's just not going to work. So I need to get a little bit more off the grid, I think, before I invest in such things.
You might have issues with your association if you tried to bring a pipe
Oh
organ.
yeah, the HOA is not going to have it.
Yeah,
For sure.
I don't. They would frown on that, I think.
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, it really comes down to, like I said, it's my understanding, like this notion of sort of higher level human endeavors, and you can get that through conscious bending, maybe meditation, or however you do that. Some people even get it through like intense exercise. But there's something specifically to me. I mean, especially if you consider Beethoven, anything past even like I think Sonata number 8, which is the Pathétique, he was already going deaf at that point in time. And by the time he was into the teens, and I'm sure like a proper Beethoven historian would confirm or deny this, but by the time he had written that Appassionata that I'm suggesting that you check out, number 23, he was completely deaf. So just to have that sort of an understanding of that clockwork of musicianship to write such grand things, like I just want my brain to be able to get as close to that sort of quote majesty, not to sound corny, as possible. And I think that the exercise of studying and learning classical piano is, I guess, the closest I'm going to get to a religious experience in my life.
Well, I absolutely agree with you, and it's one of the rants that I do on my podcast about the encroachment of computer-generated noise in pop music, because when
Yes.
the computer creates too much of the noise rather than a human being creating it, it removes
Yes.
that soul from the music.
It is, and I think it's very interesting because I think a lot of people have a very two-dimensional understanding of music. You have basically your melody and then your bass line, and that's mostly because most people are educated. And by the way, this isn't trying to be like snobby or anything, because the way that I used to listen to music before I started studying it was wrong. I was one of those people, I hear the guitar riff, right? And then I hear the bass line and then the drum, and it's very sort of two-dimensional. And I think one of my most important aspects of learning through J.S. Bach specifically are, number one, his two-part inventions, where you firstly start understanding voicing. You have two distinct voices that play off of each other. Sometimes the left hand takes the dominance, sometimes the right. And my current learning is on what are called partitas. And if you're not familiar with Bach partitas, or if you're somebody viewing, I highly recommend opening up Spotify or whatever you listen to and type in Maria Tipo, J.S. Bach partitas. And it's an incredible thing because they were originally written for the harpsichord. So the harpsichord is a one dynamic. Every note has the same dynamic range, whereas a piano, you could be soft and loud or whatever. And her interpretations of these partitas, which are 3-voice little tiny sonatas, it's just mind-blowing how beautifully she can separate. Like, you hear the chorus, you clearly hear the mezzo-soprano separate from the soprano, separate from the tenor, separate from the bass, and it's almost like you're listening to a symphony performed on piano. And so I think once I started learning partitas, now even the way that I hear pop music or jazz music changes. I don't just hear, oh, there's the bass doing its thing, there's the melody or the guitar solo riff. I hear the voices in the chorus. And that developmentally alone, just the weird notion that you're not listening to music properly is a funny concept, because that's the easiest thing to do. You put it on and you hear it, right? But I think that there's an understanding level of, there's a more, I guess you could say, educated or intellectual way to process what the music is telling you. And the second you start understanding these notions of like voicing and fugues, 3-voice, 4-voice iterations, then I think the listening to music becomes far more enjoyable and complex at that point. Do you find that yourself?
Yes, and it's very similar to somebody who is a film director watching a film, because you don't see it in the same way that the average theater goer is going to see it. They're going to see it for what was represented, where the director will look at it and go, oh, I should have cut there, or they should have done this, or they know.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because with this book that I have out, I started you were talking about separating yourself from the noise that's on the internet, which is a challenge in itself. Like, forget writing a novel, which is one challenge. Your next challenge is, how do you stand out whatsoever? So one of the things that I've been doing is producing actual videos. Like I rented out a green screen, our green screen studio. I hired proper stunt people and actors to play like Kaiser Wilhelm, and I had custom costumes made for some of the characters. And that's not to insinuate that I'm a filmmaker by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a new love that I'm finding. But it's funny now that I'm using like green screen and VFX and stuff like this. When I watch films, I'm like, oh, I can see where the halo on the green screen is, or you know what I mean? Just it's a different way of enjoying the process of the art. And you find that the true masters are always the one that even when you know all the illusionist tricks, it still looks like magic.
Well, it's true. And actually, I saw an interview with Orson Welles who said that that was the unfortunate side of his career, because he couldn't go in, just sit and watch a film and enjoy it anymore because his brain wouldn't allow him to. He was always very, critical of the cuts and the lighting and the angles and all of this stuff. We do got to get to your book. We've only got a couple of minutes left here. So why don't you just, I don't even want to try to pronounce the title.
Oh, it's fine. I have a copy here. Well, let me run it real quick. I'll show it to you. It's, this is it's the Nosferatu Conspiracy. This is the second book in the series, and it's pronounced the Sommelier. Mind you, if I were French, I would pronounce it like my piano instructors are all French, because I study at a French Conservatory. And so when they were very happy to see this, and the way they pronounce it sounds like eloquent and lovely. But I'm an American, so I say sommelier. But it basically is that word means like a wine steward or somebody who is an expert in
well, right.
wine.
That's what I thought it meant. Yeah. Well, so the French pronunciation is sommelier, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Okay.
That's oh boy, I'm from Ohio. What can I say originally? So I got a little bit of that Midwesterner twang, I think. It just doesn't want to come out.
So give us about a 1 or 2 minute synopsis of the book.
Okay, well now you put me on I can give you a couple of quick pitches. The super quick pitch is Zombies on the Western Front. The mid pitch is basically a paranormal chase thriller set during the Battle of Arras in World War I. And it's about Kaiser Wilhelm's quest for immortality as he searches for the last remaining bottle of Dracula's blood.
Well, that's interesting. Now, this is book 2, so I assume there's a book 1.
There is a book 1, which was called The Sleepwalker, and I have a copy of that too, fortunately enough. It was this one, with starring Rasputin. And so there's a theme, as you can see, with the covers, where the half face of the antagonist is on the cover of the book. And so, that one was that took place in St. Petersburg, Russia, during the Bolshevik Revolution, and essentially goes over Rasputin's diabolical influence of the Russian royal family as he tries to conjure ancient vampires to stage a coup to take over the world.
Okay, is there any particular reason for the Russian titles on the book covers?
Well, originally it was, I didn't intend it to be a series. I wanted it to just be a one-off book. So because it takes place in Russia, there's like there's like secret documents that have been recovered by the KGB in the book. So I had funny enough, a Russian paratrooper who I had made friends with when I was living in Los Angeles. And so he translated all the Russian stuff, and I thought it looked really interesting as window dressing in the book, as you read like these secret, almost like CIA government documents they would have like a Russian title and then the English translation. And I just thought it kind of looked interesting for window dressing. So I put it in the title, and now since it was sort of the branding, I just thought I would carry it over.
Well, we do have to wind this down, Brian. Thanks so much for coming on. Do you have a website you want to give out?
Sure. If you want to connect with me, you can find me on brianjamesgage.com. So that's Brian with an I, and then James Gage. Or if you want to check out the book, it's the just NosferatuConspiracy.com. And on my website, you can find some of my videos that I'm trying to put out as I develop as a classical pianist. So some of it's very basic, but I try very hard. All
right. Well, listen, we got to have you back on the show sometime. We can continue on about music, because
I'd love to.
The one question that I forgot to ask you that I'll save for the next interview is what you would find more challenging to be a success at, be a classical pianist or a rock and roll musician.
Classical pianist, easy. It's the most challenging thing you could possibly imagine.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks again.
We can extrapolate on that more next time.
Absolutely. Thanks again for coming on, Ryan.
Thank you, Douglas. I appreciate you, Fred.